Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining, everybody. This is going to be a unique experience today where I am going to drink through 6 blind samples from a single distillery. The distillery we're going to be focused on today is Old Glory. They are coming out of Clarksville, Tennessee, and we have a lot of Tennessee whiskey friends who absolutely adore this brand. But I haven't had a proper chance yet to really sit down with this brand and get to know it. So our good friend Adam Shelton provided me with a blind flight. I have a key here, but if I understand the premise correctly, we are going to be going through 6 different bottles of Old Glory. I even believe the mash bills may be different as well. But by the end of this experience, I want to figure out what Old Glory is all about, but also see maybe if they should be on our radar for a single barrel selection sometime in the future. If you're in the same boat as me and you don't know much about this brand, stick around. We are going to learn together. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right. So today we are talking about Old Glory. Really, I haven't heard a lot of national chatter about Old Glory. It's mainly been in our community, particularly those that are in the area, but they adore it quite a bit. As mentioned in the intro, they are based in Clarksville, Tennessee, and founded by Matt Cunningham. And in general, if you look up kind of the story behind Old Glory, it's not attached to any fancy marketing or heritage or found a recipe in an attic type of a story. Instead, it pretty much just sounds like Matt wanted to bring a cool distillery to his area and created Old Glory. I found some interesting background on Matt Cunningham as well. Started the company when he was at the age of 22, went on to be a firefighter for 4 years, and then leaned back into Old Glory after that, after he had all the plans together. Oh my gosh, the tape on this thing, Adam. Jeezy Pete. Curious, who does electrical tape on their samples? I do parafilm sometimes, but I can say I've probably gotten more and more lazy when it comes to this part of the process. He's got so much tape on here. The distillery opened in 2016 and they released their first whiskeys in 2021, 5 years later. I have no idea on the ages that Adam provided me here, but heck, it could be anywhere between 6, 7, 8, 9 years, technically, depending on the single barrels or the different releases that were available at the time. They are a Tennessee whiskey brand, so they do go by the Lincoln County process. And then from what I can find too, all the grains are locally sourced. I think they do have a bourbon too, now that I think about it though. So I don't know if all of them go through the Lincoln County process, but they have both a bourbon and a Tennessee whiskey. And then their other releases that you might see are a small batch, a bottle and bond, and the single barrels. Wouldn't be surprised if this flight is mostly consisting of single barrels with different mash bills. And since I don't have a bottle to show you here, why don't we pull up a quick Google search here and we can see here, this is what it looks like here. So here's Old Glory's label. Here's a version of the Tennessee whiskey bottle and bond. And see, as I mentioned a few minutes ago too, they got a bourbon as well. And I've never been on site, but the building looks pretty cool here in some of these images that I'm finding. And then from what I've been told, they've got a restaurant and a bottle shop all on site too. So it seems like a cool place to visit. So as we go through this, I am going to go through samples A through F in order, going through about a half ounce of each. I'll take notes, talk about my observations and tasting notes, and also do just a little bit of grading on the fly, which will also allow me to see the range that I would put against these Old Glory bottles. So I do have some nice glasses that are marked A, B, C, and D, but I do not have any glasses marked E and F. So for sample F, I am going to pull in a friend here, Top Dog, to help me out, represent Tennessee here. And no, this is not a Tennessee breakfast buddy. Observation right off the start here is that the colors of these are definitely showing a range. So if I compare A and D as an example there, you can see that light amber versus more of that rich burgundy almost. So let's get into the whiskey here and let's get to know Old Glory together. Cheers, everybody. And thank you to Adam for putting together this experience. Man, right off the rip there, I'm really digging this nose. There is a cleanliness to this grain. It does come across just a slight bit crafty. I'll have to do some digging and see if they're using a column still or a pot still. But I am getting just a little hint there of this cherry that is accompanied by quite a bit of effervescence even leaning into more citrus, lemon peel, orange peel kind of vibes. It doesn't come across overly sweet though. The rest of the nose almost reminds me more of a darker bread, almost like a pumpernickel bread, even. And then there's just this nice oak on there. Nothing that screams too old, probably 6, 7 years old, but again lends itself more to that fresh feel, as I was saying. Let's see if the palate follows suit. Cheers, everybody. Follows the nose pretty well. There's even a little bit of maple syrup there. The sweetness does come particularly on the finish, but it is accompanied by a lot of rye spice as well. In addition to the cherries, on the back end, I am feeling more of the lemon rind, orange rind vibes. Other thing that stood out on this one was the mouthfeel. Came across extremely oily and satisfying. Good first impression there. Off of the start here, I am going to give letter A an 85 out of 100. Mostly gave it 8s across the board, but that elevated mouthfeel, and I particularly like the flavor and the complexity mid palate, which then also gave it some good marks on balance and got it to that 85. Definitely happy with the foundation that A just provided the rest of this flight, though. That is a good ground floor to see whether we are going to go up or down from here. I got to imagine, though, the way that Adam arranged the flight was probably strategic, but I'll try not to look into that too much. So let's move on to sample B. Cheers, everybody. Similar vibes on the nose on B. It definitely has a little more sweetness than A did, but rather than being cherry, this one leans more into an apricot. So maybe we're going to find a lot of stone fruits as we go through this. But there's also that cleanliness, that effervescence getting into the citrus and lemon rind notes. And overall, the nose, again, it just comes across very clean and relaxing, almost like the times that I get to hang out outside and enjoy the whiskey. Honestly, I plan to do this flight outside, but of course, being in this crazy year where the temperature swings are 30, 40 degrees every other day, it's kind of chilly outside, and I'm kind of a wuss about that. This steps up in the nose, though. Let's see if this one steps up on the palate as well. Cheers. Great mouthfeel again, and yes, this one is sweeter than A overall. Getting more caramels and chocolate, even thinking about Rolos mid-palate. So it's got more of that candy forwardness there. The oak plays a more vital role on this as well, particularly towards the finish, where it is mainly dark. With the oak, again, kind of these citrus flavors, and then a little bit of those stone fruits again. It did score similarly to A, but I'm going to put this one at an 86. It actually earned its extra point by comparison really on the nose. B has a better nose with deeper layers than A, and that was able to notch it up that 1 point there, but otherwise, kind of scored the same way. So we're starting to feel some consistency here already. All right, let's keep this train a-moving and let's get into sample C here. Man, again, that note, it's that clean grain, rye, citrus blast, that effervescence. Almost, I mean, the best way I could almost give it an equivalence is some barrel-aged gins will have that kind of effervescence and refreshing nature of it. And this is leaning me in that way over and over again with that note. Now, that note on C is really dialed up compared to the first two. I'm not finding the stone fruits around it. It is just mainly that effervescence, lemon and orange rind. Heck, on this one, we're even getting into the flesh of the orange, honestly. Got that nice oak layer there. And again, something that would be akin to a darker bread, much like a pumpernickel rye. This one, again, leans more dry than sweet. So not as sweet as B. Tell you what, though, the flavors on C were big and bold on the nose. Even though what I'm describing might sound soft, this one was actually pretty vibrant and dialed up. All right, let's go in for a taste of C. Cheers, everybody. C did not taste like what I was expecting there. C is like this condensed, I want to say maple syrup, but again, it's not that sweet, but maybe a barrel aged maple syrup that really took on some of that oak and dark tannins. Fruit profile on C again is going to lean more into the cherry lane. Still thinking about the salted pumpernickel rye bread, a dark bread again. Great mouthfeel, great finish as well. Definitely starting to see the pattern here. These are very, very consistent in how they travel across the palate, the notes that they deliver each step of the way, their transitions. This one probably had the best initial flavors on front palate and the longest finish, though. I don't think the complexity and the flavors are there, though, compared to B. So when this one then nets out, I am still stepping up a bit, everybody. I got this one at an 87. So each one of these has progressively raised the game somewhere in the experience. But across the board, baseline, I mean, these are all getting high marks. Mouthfeel, length of the finish, and the balance. So the discrepancy in these scores right now, ranging from an 85 to an 87, is really just about my impressions of the flavors when it comes to the nose, front palate, and mid palate. I mean, shoot, we got 3 samples to go, but I think Adam's already made the statement that he was looking to make with this flight. I got an 85, an 86, and an 87. We go up from there, we're gonna start talking about other things, right? All right. Well, let's get into D. Man, now D color-wise was the darkest one of all of them. And initial impression, this is my favorite nose so far as well. This one is giving me more cinnamon roll vibe, so drifting away from that pumpernickel rye. The fruits on this one are actually now in the grape range rather than the cherry, so we're starting to get more diversity in the potential fruit profile of these. Gosh, maybe even in the blackberry too. And there's like a layer of like powdered sugar on top of these as well. And then there's this nice underlying oak presence that's not too aggressive, but does give it a nice baseline among some of the other sweeter things that I'm detecting. Oh, geez, my anticipation for this one's getting higher. Well, let's get into D. Cheers, everybody. So yeah, D does lack that effervescence, lemon and orange parts of it. It's not on the palate either. So D is an outlier compared to the first 3. We'll figure out what that means when we get into the reveal. That Rolo aspect of it is still there with the caramel and the chocolate wrapped around it, drifts into a cherry grape kind of a range, and overall is the most consistently sweet throughout the experience. Mouthfeel on this one actually isn't as velvety as what I was getting on the prior samples. Still very good though. And the finish on this one drops off a little faster than it did on C. Man, I'm putting this one at an 87 as well. Lost a few points on the more technical elements, but gained points because I actually prefer this flavor profile more than the other 3 on its own. I just wish the mouthfeel and the length of the finish kind of lined up with what I was getting on the other ones. All right. We are still consistently in this 85 to 87 range so far. I would certainly love to see one of these really knock it out of the park with a 90. It would be great to understand the true upper range of what Old Glory has here. But the consistency that I'm finding here is starting to lay out at least the floor. So let's get into E. Cheers, everybody. And if you're still here and we're all the way on E and you haven't hit that like and subscribe, what are you doing? You've clearly found a home with us here. Hit that subscribe, help us build this community up, and let's have some fun. So now getting into E, E has a lot of similarities with D, where I am thinking more about cinnamon rolls, maple syrup, white sweet cream, but maybe back a bit to that effervescence part. There is that refreshing nature is back on this one, though it is certainly in the background. And the oak profile really doesn't have a say in this particular nose. So let's see if it shows up on the palate. Cheers, everybody. Oh, this one ended up being a fruit bomb. Gosh, I wasn't really getting that on the nose. Lots of cherry again. Still thinking about those Rolos. The chocolate on this one is actually dominating quite a bit. Mid palate into the finish, more so than any of the other samples so far. But this is like a rich chocolate. And there is that vanilla cream aspect on there as well. Maybe even going back and forth between eating a Rolo or eating a cherry cordial. Maybe just make a sandwich out of those two, and that's kind of this profile. There is a nice lingering oak, though, on the finish. This finish is actually deceptively long, where I kept thinking it was over, but it keeps roaring back. E might be my favorite one so far. I put E at an 88. Again, with all of these just having this baseline great mouthfeel and the length of the finish there, it's really just coming down to a flavor preference and how much I am just purely enjoying the flavors as I'm trying to track them from the nose to the front palate to the mid palate to the finish. That was the most enjoyable one, though. I would return to that one more so than the other 4. So there's only one left, and we are pulling in our friend here, Top Dog, to help us out on this last sample. Oh, geez. Okay, that was a bit different too. Going back into the grape range off of initial impression there. Gosh, and even when I say grape, like almost getting into a brandy vibe on top of that. Deceptively, this is like the oakiest one on the nose. And then it's got that maple syrup again, almost like hanging around some old trees covered in sap. Back into the pumpernickel rye vibes, a little salted dark bread there, and got that refreshing nature back again. Getting into that effervescence. Man, a little bit of that powdered sugar too. This one has elements of multiple ones here. This is probably actually the most complex of all the noses. Man, let's see if it lives up to the palate here. If this one follows through on the palate, it's got a good chance of being the winner, at least in terms of the scoring on this flight. And then we'll go through the reveal and do some comparisons. Yeah, it's in that cherry and grape range. It definitely has that refreshing nature that pops in with more of the orange when it comes to mid palate into the finish. Still getting those Rolo vibes. So talking about the caramel and the chocolate, got a little bit of that salted pumpernickel rye bread. Killer mouthfeel. This one's interesting too, because it's actually finishing on the front of my tongue more so than in the back. It took a few sips. I was actually initially very disappointed in the length of this finish, but it has redeemed itself by third sip. So that's good. Solid oak profile throughout that as well, particularly on the finish, where you do get this vibrant and relaxing oak yet again. And this one scored an 88 again. Really like the flavors on this one, maybe lack some of the complexity that I was getting on some of the others. And while the finish did redeem itself, wasn't enough to give it like an extra point on the finish there, thus evening out with E. But overall, I mean, I don't know if Adam did this on purpose, but I graded the first one an 85. I graded the last one an 88. And all the scores in between were the exact same, an 87 and 88. So that gives me a very good understanding of this profile, though. You know, that's the one thing I really like to do with the brand, particularly when we're trying to understand whether we should potentially pursue a single barrel as well, is understanding the profile and understanding the potential range, and then trying to bring that culmination of all of that knowledge into the barrel pick. And then I can also be more specific when it comes to their profile, what I taste and what I like. So let's get into this key here. Now, before we look at this, D was the outlier. Like D came across as if it was a totally different whiskey. The other ones, A, B, C, E, and F, I don't know. They had more tangible relationships that I could latch onto, particularly A, B, C. But D is the one that was definitely an outlier. All right, so let's see what we were getting into here, and let's talk about Old Glory a little bit more. Okay, so Old Glory Flight. Note, bourbon mash bill is 73% corn, 19% rye, 8% malted barley. Tennessee whiskey mash bill is, 73% corn, 19% wheat, 8% malted barley. You know, it took my eyes there a second to figure out the distinction between that R and that W with the rye and the wheat. I was like, those are the same mash bills because the proportions were the same, but the secondary grain is different. Oh, okay. So we'll walk through this step by step, but A was 4 years old, 11 months. And then he said the proof is somewhere between 120 and 130 proof. You know, these actually might have been samples he gave me from the barrel to try these out. That's interesting. So, but that was only 5 years old. I would not have guessed that. I could definitely tell that it was on the younger side, but I was still between 6 and 7 in my mind. So A is a Tennessee bourbon. So it was the rye leaning mash bill. So it does make sense then for that more effervescence I kept going to, particularly when we were pointing out the orange and everything. Man, I'm gonna take another sip of A here. I can't believe it's only 5 years old. Yeah, still getting that Rolo note. So next was B. B is also a Tennessee bourbon. 5 years, 7 months, ranging between 120, 130 proof. Yeah, B was pretty good. Definitely got a lot more of that cherry grape nature off of B coming off of A. But still, for a 5.5-year-old whiskey, shattering my expectations quite a bit there. So then C was 6 years, 9 months, 129.3 proof. Man, tell you what, I didn't talk about it on the video, but had I been trying to guess proof on any of these, I would have been in the mid-teens probably this entire time. Sometimes my proofometer is broken. This flight definitely broke me on that note, because all these are between 120 and 130, by the way. So C was a Tennessee bourbon again. So A, B, and C are related, though technically D is a Tennessee bourbon as well. I thought D was the outlier, but I'm going to go back to D in just a moment to see if I can get that. But I was getting those similar notes between A, B, and C. So really what we were doing there was learning the core notes and range of their Tennessee bourbon, which is going to have some degree of stone fruit, some degree of that salted pumpernickel rye bread, a little bit of that effervescence and cleanliness. But D, though. So D is a Tennessee bourbon as well. 6 years, 126.8 proof. Man, even going back to it now, it's just a completely different animal. This was my favorite one of the four bourbons. And I really do not get any of those citrus flavors on D. D isn't even older than C. C is older than D technically. And D was the darkest one in the whole flight, and it was only 6 years old. E and F changes the game. Both of these were actually Tennessee whiskeys. And that means they were the wheated mash bill versus being the rye mash bill. You know, it's interesting. I mentioned on F how it was all finishing on the tip of my tongue. And I need to learn a lesson here. I've talked about this before. I believe it was Dixon Dedman who was trying to explain in a class that you could actually tell if the secondary grain is wheated or rye based on where it finishes. And I'm almost certain that the lesson that he was trying to teach there was if it finishes up front, it's typically a wheater. And if it finishes in the back, it's a rye. And I was calling that out on F now in retrospect. Still though, both of these do have, even without that rye aspect, that cleanliness and even getting into what I'm still describing as that effervescence note. Clearly not driven by the rye grain. That's something else in the process then. E and F actually were the same age, 6 years, 6 months, and both were between 120, 130 proof. So this is going to be a first for me on multiple levels. So in the end, I graded the Tennessee whiskeys higher than the Tennessee bourbons. Both Tennessee whiskeys I gave an 88. The bourbons I range between an 85 and an 87. Not only is that atypical for me to rate a Tennessee whiskey higher than a bourbon, Jack Daniels aside, but to rate a wheated Tennessee whiskey higher than a high rye bourbon is also very out of character for me. Gosh, going back to it though, I agree. E and F were the top two, knowing everything I know now, and they come across a lot older than 6.5 years. If you were to ask me to guess the ages on these, I would have said 8 years. All right, so there's only one thing to do here, and that is to make a monster blend. We're going to do so in a Mardi Glas whiskey nose. I'm going to try to do equal proportions here of all the samples. Though honestly, my chances of returning to these, especially if there's only, I'm just pouring them all in. I will not be drinking this all, but I am about to go cook the family dinner. So this will be a dinner companion from this point on. But let's do a Megatron blend here of all the bourbons and the Tennessee whiskeys. Let's see what stone fruits and cinnamon sugar vibes survive this. Yeah, E was definitely my favorite. That was definitely the one that had far less to put into this mixture. All right, let's swirl this up a little bit here, let it mingle, and let's see how our first Old Glory LE blend does. Cheers, everybody. Let's get into this thing. Man, it's that dang Rolos on steroids. Rolos, powdered sugar, cinnamon roll. Man, that cleanliness is there too, with that effervescence on the back end of that nose. All right, let's see what it does on the taste. Cheers, everybody. Same range. Smash a cherry cordial and a Rolo together. The blend is also quite spicy by comparison as well. I really love what this 4-grain blend did. The more I sit with it, the more complex it gets. Mouthfeel is fantastic. Complexity of the flavors is actually up a tick by comparison, combining both the Tennessee whiskey and the bourbon. Man, I'm getting spice, I'm getting oak, I'm getting sweetness, I'm getting cherry. Oh my gosh, I'll tell you what, this blend teeters on like an 88, 89. This actually might be the best pour of this whole session here. Main takeaway from all this, Adam, is they should consider a 4-grain because that's incredible. That's really, really good. If you happen to have the ability to combine a Tennessee bourbon and a Tennessee whiskey and make a blend, make them about 60% bourbon, 40% Tennessee whiskey. Let me know what you think in the comments. And in general, when it comes to Old Glory, let me know what you think in the comments as well. Have you had a chance to try this brand? Is this brand on your radar? And what do you think of the idea of Hello Again Whiskey Friends pursuing any type of single barrel with Old Glory? And just remember, while you can always find more whiskey, you can never have enough whiskey friends like Adam. And you know what? I'll throw Travis in there as well because I got to associate those two with Old Glory. So take care of those around you like they take care of me. And we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye, buddy.